Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Playing with Watercolors workshop today. My name is Christine Muir. I am the Community Librarian at Cary Library. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our foundation and the people who have donated to the Cary Library Foundation. Their donations support all of our programming, and we're very grateful for that. Today we have Hanna Melnicek, who is a professional artist and art instructor who's done a few programs for us that people have really enjoyed. And I just want to let people know, if you are really interested in watercolors, the Senior Center in Lexington is also doing a program on October 19th called Watercolor Masking. So if you want to continue your experimenting after today, feel free to check in with the Community Center for that. I am recording this program for people who couldn't make it, or if you want to revisit or practice again. So if anyone has any concerns about being recorded, you can turn off your camera, and that is fine. And I can also pause the recording if we do any group sharing so that people don't feel put on the spot at all. You can also send me a private chat as the host and let me know if you have any concerns, and I will keep that confidential, but then I wouldn't share the recording. And after today's class, I will send all of you and everyone who registered a link to a survey asking what you thought about this program and what else you might like to see the library offer. And if we do have a recording put up publicly, I'll share the link to that recording with you as well. So with that, I will turn this over to Hanna, and I will let her introduce herself a little bit. And Hanna, just let me know when you want me to start sharing your slideshow.
Okay, great. Hey, good morning, everybody. Nice to see maybe people that have been here. I don't really see everybody, so you know, but if you've been to one of the classes, it's nice to see you again. Thanks for coming back. And for all the new people, welcome. So just a little bit about the workshop. This is it's called Playing with Watercolors for a reason. I didn't want to kind of it to be people to feel like they're going to become, well, obviously you don't become an expert after one class, but it's really a very light approach to watercolors, because I will say that is not my medium of choice. You know, I'm more of an oil painter, although I haven't done that for many years. So I used to be an oil painter. Now I'm working on children's books, illustrations. So I'm going to have a workshop on that in the future. But I do use watercolor for my children's books. But I do have one person that, if you really want to learn about watercolors, there is one person that I would recommend to you, and I will show you her work in the slideshow. So, you know, I just want to make sure the expectations are, you know, not that you shouldn't be, you know, excited about all this, but I don't know what your experience level is. So I'll just go ahead with what I've prepared. And if you want to go and do something different, but stay with us, or if you want to show us something you've done, or you know, because many people do watercolor like on their own. So I just wanted to tell you that and give you that information. Don't leave. So anyway, so I do have some slides to show about just kind of inspiration and some artists who many of you may be familiar with, and then just I'll end it up with what we're going to do. So we can show the slides. All right, so I had fun making this one, Playing with Watercolors. Are you going to make that bigger? Okay, you are. Thank you so much. I don't know where I would be without Christine, because already this morning I had a panic. I couldn't get things going. All right, with the technology. Okay, so here's our class. Let's play. Okay, moving along. Just a simple color wheel to get us started. All right, just showing you some beautiful colors and moving on to John Senior Sargent. So if you guys know his work, his paintings, mostly known for portrait paintings, but he's also known for these amazing watercolors. So we're just gonna run through some watercolors of Italy, Venice. Well, a lot of them are in Venice. I don't know, is this in Venice? I'm not sure, but anyway, let's move through them. Let's look at the next one, yeah. And you can see how loose his brushwork is. But these are more like, I don't know, they're finished watercolors as far as I'm concerned, but I'm imagining he did them right there, or he sketched them right there, and then he went in with the color. They seem very quickly, well, for me, this would take a long time, but for him, I'm sure very quickly executed. You could see just like they're impressionistic, the gestures of the people and then the water. Let's move along. Okay, next. So here, especially here, when you look at the people in the gondola and the gondoliers and so on, they're just left, you know, I mean, they're not like spelled out. It's not a completely, the heads of the people aren't rendered very carefully. It's more of a just a mark. That's one thing about water we're going to start with is mark making and just kind of playing with water, how much water to put into the paint, and just mark making. And he did a nice little drawing underneath. You can still see the pencil marks sometimes. In some of them, in this one, you could see it a little bit over here. And I don't know if you can see my finger there. So, okay, next. Beautiful, right? Just beautiful mixing of color, beautiful architecture. Next. He's an amazing draftsman, so that does help him in terms of doing these. But just even if you look at the windows on the right, they're just suggestions. That's what I love about watercolor. You can just suggest things, and you don't have to, you know, you could be very realistic and spell everything out, but I personally love his work. Okay, next. Next. I love this one just because the face of the man is just undefined, but you just get the posture, kind of a gesture, the way he's standing there, the light and all that stuff. So it's a really, you know, beautiful piece without getting too, again, descriptive. Next. And then I don't know who did this. I found it and I loved it. Another one in Italy. Okay, where do I missed my trip to Italy this summer, so I'm thinking Italy and the Leaning Tower there, and I don't know what other buildings there. But anyway, this is fun, and I love the fun part of this piece, the playfulness and just the experimentation in the back, and then working into the watercolor with ink, with pen and ink, it looks like, or Sharpie or something. Okay, so we have a couple more of this person's work. Yeah, the Taj Mahal. I love this, you know, right here, this experimentation on top with the sky is great. Really beautiful, colorful. Next. And that one too, somewhere, I'm thinking, isn't this like Cinque Terre, which I was supposed to go there? Maybe I'll go this summer, let's hope. Anyway, love this, love the colors. And then I don't know who did this, but what I included this because the background is very soft and blurry, and then, you know, maybe letting it dry and then working on top of it with the water lilies, or maybe possibly masking. That could be probably masked, something called frisket, which maybe many of you have used. I know about frisket, but I actually didn't use it. I didn't use it. I have taken some watercolor classes, but we didn't use it. But anyway, these lilies are probably blocked out and added later, I imagine. On the other hand, sometimes you can work right on top of watercolor. Okay, next. This is Homer, Winslow Homer. And again, I like the just sort of impressionistic quality, the freshness. That's the nice thing about watercolors. It's so fresh. Is that Winslow Homer? Homer, it's not, I'm lying. It's Fairfield Porter. Forgive me. I think of Fairfield Porter more for his oils, but I found this watercolor. I think so. I'm looking down here. I'm like, okay, Hanna, get that straight. All right, the next one is Winslow Homer. You'll see. There you go. That's Winslow Homer. Very different, right? Look at those clouds, amazing. Gee, beautiful. And then the next one is again, same artist. Again, love those clouds, incredible. And what's next? It's another one by Homer. Yes, let me look right. That is Homer. Very different, you know, very different than the other two. Was softer. And next. This one, I don't know who did that one. I don't see the name. I don't know what that, you know, I found it. I loved it. I loved it because I think things are like bleeding into each other, kind of, you know, with the everything sort of soft and bleeding, and allowing the watercolor to play a role here, really allowing the watercolor to, well, of course, the watercolor always plays a role, but here it really feels like it's kind of moving in this direction, It's and then just the person with the little dog, you know, just a small, again, indication of it, and the trees on the right. I think it's very, very lovely. Next. And this is the work of the artist that actually, Margaret Glick, who teaches at the Cambridge, you know, Concord Art Center. She's really good. I mean, she used to be in a studio next to mine in Vernon Street. I should have taken lessons from her. But if you are interested in really getting, you know, into this medium, she is the person she's a go-to, because she is, this is what she does, you know, and you can go, she's got a great website. So I'm advertising for her. I haven't seen her in like 20 years, but I'm, since my daughter was born, and I left the Vernon Street studio, but I think she's amazing, you know. If I was younger, I'd take younger because I have my books going on. I've got too many other things to do, you know. I don't have time to take on another class, but I would I recommend her to everybody. Okay, next. Oh, and this is another piece that I think is just beautiful. Just kind of the broad brush strokes. And I think we're moving to next. Okay. Oh, this is Hanna's piece. So you can now see, this is, it's a little bit dull, this slide, but this is something that I would do for like a children's book, or just I did this for when I was working at McCarthy Town School as an art integration specialist. We had to do something with clouds or whatever. So this is one of my pieces, and then I'll show you a couple others. This is something from one of the books that I played around with. I've abandoned this book already, but this is Princess. It's called Princess and the Planets. This is advertising for my next workshop. And then the next one, that's another one from that one. So this is all watercolor, and yeah, just all watercolor for the most part, little collage. And then one more, I think. This is a piece I did too that I did from copying. So this is a really good way to experiment with watercolors, I think, is to take, you know, like look at Rembrandt, or look at, well, I don't know, look at John Senior Sargent. I'm thinking of Rembrandt's ink pieces. I don't know what he did with watercolors, but I don't know if he did, but ink pieces. But this, I forget who I copied this from, because I did it some time ago, but I thought it was quite, you know, quite nice to do this. And I learned a lot through copying. Good watercolor paper I used there. And then let's move on to what we're going to do today, because I want to give us plenty of time. So just a watercolor wheel. I thought of doing those today, and I was going to, but then I thought, no, we'll do something else. But anyway, I love these mixtures of colors. This is probably magenta, cyan, and yellow. So you can see this watercolor wheel, and then there's the next one, which is very different depending on your palette. So we can move to the next watercolor wheel. Okay, see how different that is? Like really different, like two different, like the one before that, I think they used the cyan, magenta, and yellow, and here's just a different palette of colors, and you can see such a different mixture. So really fun to experiment with whatever palette or whatever colors you have. Okay, next. Okay, this is, no, we can just move on from this one. I don't want to get into it. And oh, okay, this is, I don't know if you see, it's a little block, that little sphere, but we're going to do sphere today, and the shadow and everything like that. So we'll do a sphere. Okay, next. So this is a sphere, another sphere that I did for this, you know, so we'll do a little sphere. And then next, we're going to experiment with transparency. And then next, more transparency, just working with whatever colors you have. So instead of doing a watercolor wheel, I think we'll just work with transparency. So that'll be the last thing we do. Hopefully we have time. So just doing various shapes and combining in the overlapping parts, you know, the two, whatever color mixture those two would make. Next. So experiment with brushes, line, mark making, experiment with salt, saran wrap, do a sphere and transparent design. So we may not get through everything. If we don't get through the transparent design, you know, or maybe we just get it started and you guys can, you know, work on it on your own. But let's see. Yeah, I've only spent too long on this probably. Okay, let's get started then. All right. So the first thing, everybody, we're going to do is, I'm not going to get into too much in terms of talking about the best kinds of paper, the best brushes and all that. This is, again, very, very basic class, but I will show you what I'm using here today. So I've just got a simple palette, my primaries, red, yellow, and blue. I also put a little magenta out here, and this looks more like orange, but it is a type of a red, and here's a different red. I have like an ultramarine blue, and this might be cobalt, I can't remember right now. So I'm just going to keep it really simple with my palette. So if you want to lay out your colors on your palette, you can do the 3 primaries, or you can do other colors if you want to experiment, whatever you want to experiment with. The other thing I'm going to use is just this very simple, it's Prang, but you can buy this also with Crayola. So this is something that I would use with the students, the kids at school, but I found it quite nice. I mean, you know, this is, of course, if you're going to really get into this, you should probably buy either Cotman, Winsor Newton, or there's Winsor Newton. There's a lot of really good brands of watercolors, but this is fine for what we're doing today. And, you know, I use it quite a bit for my artwork. So I'm not very, I'm not a watercolor snob. So, okay, so then the other thing is some brushes. You can spend hundreds of dollars on brushes. I'm also using kind of very simple brushes, maybe even bought them at Michael's. So if you're wanting to get into all that kind of detail, there's plenty of books, plenty of videos, and then there's Margaret Glick. But I'm just going to do simple. What are we doing first? Okay, first we're doing just like, so everybody, if you could take your time and put out your colors, or if you've already done that, or if you've been doing watercolor for a while and, you know, you can do whatever, something else, and you can share it with us. So I'm just going to add, you know, just as much water as I need, or just experiment. And I'm just going to play first for the next 5 minutes or so, just with like experimenting. Oops, nobody can see that. With just the brush and letting, so I'm just going to go ahead and you guys can experiment with me, seeing how much, what I could do. Like my brush is dry, so I'm working with the dry brush. I'm going to get a little, you know, I want to work with the tip of my brush. So this is just the playful part of experimenting with the watercolor. So everybody can join me, hopefully, and make shapes.
And I just want to let people know, if at any time you have any questions about what we're working on, or any questions about watercolor in general, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask, or you can put something in chat and I will jump in and read it for you. But it's meant to be kind of an interactive workshop sort of a thing, so feel free to speak up at any point if you would like to.
So this is almost like, I think of it as a kind of a loosening up for the workshop. And again, I have no idea if people have worked with watercolors, or, you know, you're just trying them for the first time, or just whatever. So this is just kind of not structured, this part. But in a way, it's kind of like my favorite thing to do, in a sense, because you don't have, you know, you have these expectations. Oh, it's got to look like that, or it's got to do this, or something like that. So I've already, you know, and I'm seeing the nice transparency over the dried things. This is drying pretty quickly. So I'm using really nice paper. I will say a couple things about paper. So let's see, a really good brand of paper. Let me see where that. Just one second. Is Arches. I don't know how you pronounce that. Movlin, Movlin paper. Arches is really good. I think this is my Arches. It's very, it's like 140 pounds, so it's thick and it's very rough. I really like the rough watercolor paper. Sometimes you could use, so it's cold pressed. Sometimes you can use that hot pressed one, and that's smooth, and that's good for details, I suppose. But I've used that, and I'm not so fond of it. And this one also, I think you can go over and scrub things out. Like, so if you want to remove, you can't really erase, but if you, well, you can erase to a certain extent. So hopefully everybody has a paper towel too. Like if I want to get rid of this here, I'm just going to add more water to it, and I can really scrub and just, you know, I don't know if I can get rid of all of it, but quite a bit. It can be removed. So this paper, which is the Arches, allows me to treat it roughly. Unlike some papers, you have to be very delicate. There's Strathmore, which is okay. There's Canson, you know, different kinds. So if you get into this, try different kinds of paper and see the difference that it makes, you know, really, because it can be so frustrating. I was teaching this other class where they were you know, this where I work, and they were doing brush and ink, and they're just using regular white paper. And I said, you know what, we have to, it's an online class, we have to make the students buy watercolor paper because they will have such a better experience with it. And so I think they did have a better experience. Now they have all this watercolor paper. I'm like, okay, and they were just using brush and ink. So I said, you guys better you know, get into some other stuff, watercolor. So yeah, so I'm having fun here, just experimenting, and you know, in a few minutes here, I don't know how long we've been doing this, we'll move on to the other one. This is like free association, just trying all your colors on your palette.
How's everyone doing with their experimentation? Any questions, any thoughts, comments on how it's working, or surprises? I really liked the examples you showed in the beginning, Hanna, because I liked the different colors. Some of them were darker than I typically think of watercolors being. So it was fun to see a variety of styles.
Yeah, and you know, if any of the students were showing the slide show, they'd probably have very, you know, you might have very different people that whose work you really like, or that, you know, styles you like. There's just so much. But I always think of a sergeant as being such a master at the craft. And I have looked at what these photorealists whose work is just so meticulous. They must be using a very small brush, and it's amazing what you can do with watercolor. But I personally like the freedom and the freshness and the energy of something that, like, you know, I like the stuff I showed you, you know, that's what I like. Anyway.
Hanna, we have a question in chat.
Yeah.
How do you get such a big amount of paint on your plate? It looks like big chunks, and the person asking is wondering if they'd run out of paint more quickly if doing that. I can't remember if you prepared the plate before we opened up the meeting, or if you did that in front of the class.
I'm sorry, everybody. Yeah, probably I should have taken my, you know, one always gets a little nervous before class, so you try to do as much preparation as you can. And I prepared it ahead of time. And the other reason I'm going to tell you, I prepared ahead of time because some of my paints are a little bit older and they're a little bit dry, because I am not always the best person to put the caps on. Uh-oh, don't follow my example. So I had to really squeeze, and I had to use a toothpick. So I prepared, they're really not big blobs, but this will, you know, this will take me through the class. Well, may not, I may need more magenta, but so they're not super big, but you know, you could use these like tomorrow when they're dry. That's the thing about watercolor. When it's dry, you can still revive it, you know, you can revive it. Like I remember I was taking this class and we used this kind of thing here. This is what we used. And you know, put our colors however we put our colors, and you could reuse them. You put a little plastic over it, and sometimes I didn't even put the plastic over it, and I still reused them. So I don't know, there might be a different kind of practice, but I think it's, you know, you go with whatever you find that is going to work for you. And it's kind of also depends on like the kind of person you are, if you're more careful with stuff, you know. Anyway, I hope I answered that question. Like I was going to say, these aren't that big, but
so I do have a couple other questions in chat.
Okay.
One is a follow-up to this one. Did you use tubes of paint? That what you're using today came out of a tube, right? And not from the, okay.
Yes, okay, very good. I mean, I'm sort of starting probably in the middle. So these are my tubes of paint that I used here. So like I will be using, and the brands are Winsor Newton, Holbein, I have all different ones. Let's see if there's any other third one, and Cotman. So those three brands. And then I'm going to use this as well. And I think, you know, you can buy much more expensive things like this. In other words, there's, I forget the makers, but these cakes, you can buy them by Winsor Newton and Holbein. I'm sure you can buy, I know you can. I just happen to have this because, you know, I just happen to have this. So I'm also trying to demonstrate that this is fine to use something that is not the best, which is Prang or Crayola. They're just fine to use for this. Maybe they're not going to be quite as vivid, but I like them. So, because I am going to use them for the next thing. All right, so I've just done a little experimenting. Oh yeah, is there another question?
I have two more questions, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Do you mix colors on your plate to make a new color, or do you just load multiple paints onto the brush and mix it that way?
That's really good. I think I have to go back a little bit. So with this part here, like that we're doing right now, is let's see, what do I do? Or there are different ways of doing it. So let's just see. Okay, so I could take, for example, I could take some yellow here, and then I can take, just dip the tip into the orange and mix it right on here, you know, so that works. I could then, you know, hold on, what happened here? Let me see. So that is a good question. I can then wipe off my brush and still, I can take out some of the paint. I could move it around. So either one can work. I can get into what is called like dry brush. You can see I'm scrubbing it in, and this paper lets me. Or for another matter, you know, you can certainly mix them here. I don't think there's a right necessarily or wrong way. I think you find the way that works. I think I do both sometimes. I probably mix more on my palette. I probably do mix a little bit more on my palette. But I think the other thing people could do right now is try both, and also try mixing colors that you think are going to look, you know, you're wondering what they're going to look like together. So I'm going to go with blue and, well, we know that blue and yellow is green, but I'm trying to think of a color that, well, wait a minute now. So what? If you mix them all, you're going to get mud. Also, another thing you can do right now is try to put like a dark, as dark as you can go. So yes, this is, you can wipe I always have something to wipe with.
How do you mix the colors if you're using the palette cake kinds of paint?
Okay, good question here, like this. So this is actually where you could mix them, or you could have a little plate next to you, but you can do this here. I mean, that's what they make this here, one here. And then afterwards, I usually do wash my brush in between. So can you see that here? So I'm taking a little bit of yellow, washing my brush, taking a little bit of blue, turquoise rather. That's why I'm using this, because I really like the turquoise color. And right now I've mixed it on here. So you can get your green this way, a different green. Then I'm going to add a little bit of orange to that green, so that'll be that kind of muddier color. So you're going to get like a brown color.
Could you talk in a super general way about the different shapes of brushes and what?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, like I said, I am using pretty much all these round brushes, you know, and I can get a nice point out of them. This is more of a brush that it has a bounce to it, so it's maybe a little bit more for acrylics, to be honest with you, but I like using it, and I think it could work for any water media, gouache, acrylic, watercolor. This is a little softer. This is kind of more of a watercolor brush here. And I don't have super expensive brushes, you know, but you could have them. So you could see how this one here, I can also do some precision here. I could do some precision work here with the point. You can really get it, use a bamboo brush, but you can also do sweeping. Like this might be something you use for clouds. Let's see what else. You can use, you know, a flat brush if you want to get some sort of, let's see, flat. Let me get that on there. Let me use this here. Just a flat, like for a sky, but you would probably want to use a bigger flat brush for that. But you can also do some, add more paint to it. Stippling with this, kind of stippling away, and maybe dry it a little bit. And you can see how it will bleed into another color, which is kind of nice. If this is very wet, you can add some sense of the bleeding of the color into this one. Let me just show you a couple other brushes here. Hold on. I do have some special brushes, but I don't necessarily find a use for them at this point. But let me show you. Whatever works, really. Okay. This one here is like a mop brush. So this is a watercolor, a special watercolor brush. This is Grumbacher, and you could use it, and you know, it absorbs a lot of water, and you could use a lot of paint on it. That could be used also for like a wash, a sky wash. I don't find myself using a lot of this because I'm, you know, working with my illustrations in watercolor, and I'm also, like I said, that's why I said I don't really have time to take. I am already taking another class on illustration, and I'm working with the computer now. So that's with the like a program at the computer. So I don't have time for watercolors. Like, how much time? You know, I've been taking classes all my life, but you can always learn. That's what I love about you know, about life. You can just keep taking, you keep learning everything. So this is great. I'm like starting a new class tonight. I'll let you know how that goes. But anyway, everybody, what other things? So that was my demonstration. So you have different types of brushes. As I said, you could use more of an acrylic brush, which is not as soft as this kind of, look how soft that is. It's really soft.
So Hanna, I just want to do a quick time check with you. It's 5
Yeah.
past 10. I do have 2 other questions, but I wonder if we want to demonstrate the next exercise, and then I
Yes.
can ask those 2 questions from chat.
Yes. Okay, let's do the next thing, because this one, if you people, again, if you haven't had fun with watercolors, you're about to, if you haven't had fun so far yet. All right, so next thing we're going to do is the saran wrap, because that's always a really nice, where's my saran wrap? Hold on, here it is. Okay, that's always a fun project. So, and then this is so free on this one. I am going to use my large brush, and I'm going to wake up my colors, as we used to say, wake them up with some water. And I'm really only just dabbing in there and start really, everybody, so if you want, you could watch and then do this, or you can work along. You want to keep everything really wet. Okay, what happened to my magenta? Oh, I don't have it. I'll use a little bit of magenta from here. I love this combination, this magenta and turquoise, so you get that nice purple color, or violet or something. So everything's really wet, and keep it wet and broad. Like that. Oh, maybe a little too much. Very, very wet. So everybody's trying this, hopefully, or you'd like to try this. Then I'm going to use a little bit of yellow here. One other thing. Oh, I don't want to use the yellow. I'm sorry, I didn't want to use that yellow right there, because it's going to give me that muddy color that I don't really want. It's not muddy, it's brown. It's not really muddy, but I just want very vibrant shades. So I really meant to just kind of keep it here next to the turquoise. That's okay. So you could see I'm just kind of spraying it around. And what else did I want to use here? I want to use this color. This is another blue. So this hopefully is very freeing to people, just kind of nothing blobby, just more like blobby. And if you have a larger brush, now if you have a smaller brush, maybe you just work in a smaller area with this. You could just do a smaller area. You don't have to do all this. Okay. And okay, this is just so we can do this one little experiment. So keep going until you feel, I'm going to stop in a minute because this is already drying up and I don't want it to dry, so re-wet it a little bit. Okay, so I don't know where people are at with this, but let me show you the next thing to do, which is to take some saran wrap. This one's always fun, this exercise, because, and then you just put it on there and you create some patterns like this, and then you let it dry. So like that, you let it dry. I don't know if, again, I'm gonna have to keep saying this because like maybe people have tried this, but maybe not, so we're trying it. So let me show you, I'm gonna let it dry so I won't do anything with it, but let me just show you, this is like an example of what happens. Really pretty stuff. I've used this for my illustrations as paper for the background for things. I think I've used this, yeah, and for planets, for my planets, I'll cut it out. Or you could use it well, you know, you could use it for collage or whatever, or anything like that. So here's some 3 examples, and this one we let it dry, and then we'll take the stuff off later.
So while you're letting it dry and while people kind of experiment with that, can you talk about dry paper versus wet?
Oh, okay. Well, as you noticed, I was sort of just starting off with dry paper. I mean, you know, typically people will take the piece of watercolor paper and they'll tape it onto some sort of masonite or something harder. Like they tape it around the edges, and they might use a spray bottle to spray it down, or they might use like a thicker brush to wet the paper. And I mean, I think that works really well with like if you're going to do a sky, you know, you can do that. You can wet it and then allow things to just occur in the sky. So I think there were different reasons for it. I was just going straight for the dry paper because I'm not doing anything that I feel is specific to it. But I think that is a good thing in this workshop is to kind of take some, you know, let me get a piece of paper. This is not good watercolor paper. You're going to notice, I mean, I don't know if you're going to notice, but I'm going to notice this is just, it absorbs without ever having to, you know, do too much reading about this. You can just really, everybody can just tell what stuff does. Like this one absorbs I don't know who made it, but it's good for experimenting. So I'm wetting it, and, you know, then I'm going to take some paint here. So I'm using the softer brush, and it's not doing much, you know. Well, you can spread it around. So that would be maybe, you know, it's advantageous, I think, for some things to use the wet into wet technique. I think you have to experiment with what you want to do. So, but also just an example of how this paper just is not playing, you're not going along with what I want it to do. It's absorbing the ink in a very weird way. I don't know, the watercolor in a very weird way, but I didn't, you know, that's just kind of what I did for a little demo. But it's good for playing around with, not so much for this kind of thing. So that's really my answer. I think it depends on what you, I remember stretching watercolor paper and then just coating the whole thing with water and then going into it, and, you know, it would start drying anyway, and then painting into that for whatever, I can't remember. Oh, because I was just doing a blue wash. That's all. I was starting a little dark at the top and then working down gradually. That's a kind of a typical exercise you do where they start you off with a dark top and then you add more water. So it's kind of like the sky getting, I don't know, lighter or darker, whichever way. Okay, so are we ready for our next one? How's everybody doing? So I'm not going to take this off. I mean, I could. No, it's not ready. It really needs to dry.
How long does it usually take to dry?
I don't know, 10 minutes, something like that. Depends how much water you used. Depends on the paper, but not too long. Okay, where's my other water? Oh, here it is. Okay. So I'm going to use this one for my salt experiment, which won't take long. And then we can get into, will we be able to get into? Yeah, we could start our transparency one. And I hope that people will continue to work on that. Because again, that one's like a little piece of, almost like something you can, you know, just something that's experimental, but it's also a piece of artwork that's a little different. Okay, so let me start with, I don't know what that meant. That's different. Sometimes I just talk and I'm like, what am I saying here? All right, no, it's what it is it's something that is not as much of an experiment as what we're doing. So I'm going to spray this, and I'm going to use this palette again, and it's very much the same thing that we just did. So everybody, if you're ready to start, I can't see what you're doing, so you could maybe wet your paper. If you don't have a spray bottle, which I didn't tell you to bring, and you have a bigger brush, you can also just do this and see what happens here if you just use a big brush. I should have told you to bring a spray bottle, but it's not such a big deal. Okay, so I'm just putting in, it's the same thing I did last time, except this time we're just going to put, you know, the salt on it. So you get 2 chances at this. Oh, that's nice. Ooh, I love that. I mean, it's not as bright on the screen, but I love that. And see, it's really bleeding in there. So if you have it very wet, someone is asking me about the wet paper, you can see how it can create some beautiful like one of those pieces that I showed you was a lot of wet into wet. It was the one that I didn't really know who the artist was, but it was like with that sort of soft, the man with the dog, that was very much wet into wet. And I think that, you know, Sargent is a lot about, like, some areas are wet into wet, and then some areas are like allowed to dry, and he goes over it, you know, he goes over it with darker marks. Anyway, so here's this. So hopefully you're trying this too. And one more color I'll use here. What other color do I want to use? I'll use a little orange. Well, it's actually red, but how's everybody doing? I'm like really into this. I hope you're having fun too. I hope everybody's having fun. We're not really talking. I mean, I'm the one that's talking nonstop. I know, I'll be quiet. But all right, here's the salt. Here comes the salt. All right, I don't know if you guys are at it, but here's my sea salt. You can use regular salt too, sea salt or coarser, what is it called, that other salt? Kosher salt. Yeah, you could use that too. So just sprinkle your watercolor with this. And then I have this, just like the bigger the salt is, the larger the little white spots will be, that the salt will absorb the watercolor. And then again, this is another one you have to let it dry. And the key is to do it when it's pretty wet, you know, so that it absorbs the watercolor. And let's see, I have an example, although I have to say it's not my best example. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, I had better examples, but I think I've used them for my collages for the children's book that I don't have. So I don't know if you can really tell. Maybe this one will come out better than what I just did. Right here is where the salt was, and you have the salt drinking up the water. And this is not the best paper again. So maybe that was the difference. I'm really not sure actually, because I have done this. Why it didn't come out as well as I had hoped. I did try this, and usually it looks a little bit better than this. Maybe this will look better. I don't know. It's kind of part of it is not having, you know, not knowing is the control. And you can see it's not I mean, if I'd spent 20 hours on this, I'd be like, oh, I'd like to kind of know that it worked, but I just spent, you know, 5 minutes doing this, and now I'm wondering, I don't know how it's going to come out. All right, so how are people doing? Do you have questions? Did you want, did you get a chance to try these different techniques?
I still have 2 questions in chat, but I had a question. Are we just leaving the salt on for a little bit and then you shake it off? What happens to the salt?
Yeah, we're just gonna let it dry again. Everything's kind of soaking wet, put it aside somewhere and let it dry. And then afterwards, when it's dry, you can just take the salt off. Some people I know, like some students that I've, you know, kids that I've done this project with, is they've left the salt on. I mean, the kids, they tend to like put it on, so much salt on there, and they have some, you know, they get great results. The freedom. This is the other thing is about watercolors, allowing yourself that freedom. Like when working with young students, I work with older students and younger students, but older meaning like I work at UMass Lowell. And but the younger students, they just I used to work at McCarthy Town Elementary School, and I don't work there currently, but anyway, they used to just kind of go for, you know how it is, they just go for it. They're not afraid. They're like, they're taking the salt. I'm like, no, not too much salt, and they're just putting it on there, and then I'm just amazed at what they get. I'm like, wow. So there's something about watercolor and art that like wants you to, you know, bring that kid back in you and just have fun and play with the mediums and let them, you know, enjoy yourself, not be too worried about the product, you know, just be having. Okay, so what's the question?
So there's a question about technique, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the first one. It looks like gouache, Gouache versus watercolor.
Yeah, okay. So gouache is a, you know, I use gouache as well. And sometimes I mix it with watercolor. Sometimes because it seems to me very similar. Gouache is a little bit more opaque. So it doesn't, you know, but it can be very transparent like watercolor too. But it is a medium that a lot of illustrators use in their work, I notice, because I look at a lot of books, and I see that a lot of people use gouache, and it's easier. It's a little bit more, I don't know, more opaque. It's you know, acrylics, somewhere between acrylic and watercolor, but not so much, because acrylic is very plasticky feeling to me, you know. I've used acrylics, but I'm not as much of a fan of acrylics as oils. But that's what I would say the gouache is. It can behave, I think, a lot like watercolor, because if you just add a lot of water to it, it just dilutes. I have some gouache here. I may have even put a little bit of gouache here. So maybe there's more of a technical, maybe there's more binder in one or something. But my practice with it, like probably if you took a class with Margaret Glick, she'd be like, no, watercolor and gouache, you can't mix those. But you know, I think it's okay. So try both, but I maybe stick with one for a while and see what happens if you add you know, if it's like a little bit more mixed media. Then I think maybe they're easier to use in a way, the gouache, to some extent. You can go over passages, you know, you can keep it thicker and really be, you can work it in a very different way. It allows you to work it.
So we have about 10 minutes left in the planned class time. So I don't know if you want to move ahead to another exercise for people to practice with. And then if we run past 10:30, those people who can't stay are welcome to leave. Like I said, I am recording this so you can watch it later. We can also maybe do some sharing of work, and I'm happy to pause the recording if people want to share, but not publicly, not be on camera for all of the YouTube audience. But I'm thinking, as far as timing, for those who do have the time limit, maybe we should go on to the next exercise.
Yeah.
Does that work for you, Hanna?
Oh, fine. Yeah. So we won't really get through it, but that's okay. And yeah, and does anybody want to share anything? Or, well, what's to share right now? Everything's wet, right?
Right.
We're waiting for everything to dry. Yeah, I don't know what's going to dry. You know, you could dry it with a paper towel. But anyway, okay, so should we just start with the next one?
Yeah.
All right. So the next one, you might even spend the time very quickly doing this. So the next one, you could use whatever size paper you want. You could maybe just even use half of this, since we have limited time. So I'm going to just use, I'm not going to cut it right now. I'll just maybe use half of the paper. And I'm just going to make some sort of organic shapes. This might be a little bit like the artist. What's his name? Oh, who can think of his name? Not Paul Klee, but I can't think of it right now. So organic shapes. I'm being very, like, again, free association. I'm not considering too much. I should work very lightly with the pencil, you know, if I don't want the watercolor to see too much. Or I could, but I'm doing it so people can see what I'm doing.
And Hanna, what kind of pencil is that? Because the question in chat is actually, what kind of pencil can we use for sketching or applying the watercolor?
Okay, so this is just a regular graphite HB pencil. You could use a regular 2B pencil, nothing special, just a regular pencil, whatever you've got available. Sometimes I think if you want to work very lightly, you can use what is, you know, the H pencils, which are very hard. And this is an HB, but you can see I can go quite dark with it. But just working very lightly. I don't really like what I did there, so I'm going to do this again here, and maybe lightly. So I'm thinking of this artist, Kandinsky, who did kind of interesting pieces with color, but I think his are I don't know how much watercolor he did, but he did oils. Anyway, so trying to overlap your shapes a little bit. They can all be circles, they can be squares. I don't think you can see that too much. I'll go a little darker. Yeah, just an abstract sort of design, little like little organic shapes, because basically what you're going to do is, you know, pick a color, and then maybe I'll make this one here blue, and then this is going to be yellow, so I'll get green. So instead of doing a wheel, I'm just going to you know, work with these shapes. It'll be fun to see what happens, like the transparency. It's a little difficult to do that transparency, but we're going to give it a try. So has everybody done a little design? Maybe has everybody started or done something?
Looks like it.
Okay, so you can use whatever colors you want, and if you want to plan ahead, you can also do that. Like sometimes I do that, but like I might put yellow, white, you know, just put my yellow here. This is going to be blue. If you want to, this is as much planning as I would do. I'm not going to do it right now, but because this way, you know, you won't forget. So very important to get your water clean all the time, a lot. And I'm gonna just dab because I've already got a lot of green already here, and get rid of that a little bit. So trying to keep my area cleaner. That's pretty good. All right, so going with the yellow. So there's a couple ways when you're doing this. I think I'm going to add a little more water to this. I'm not going to spray this because I want to have some control over it, so less water, but I'm just dipping it in. So as far as the transparency goes, there's kind of different ways to do it. You can let this yellow dry and then put you know, the whole this shape here, which you can't really see, but I'll just go, could be blue, and then it can go on top of this, and you can see how that works. Or you can, while it's still a little wet, you can mix it in there. It won't be like a pure transparency, but it'll be, you know, a mixture there. So let's try that. Now, it will probably bleed because it's still wet. So if you don't want it to bleed, you should let it dry. Okay, so I'm starting with the blue. So you can see this, somebody was asking me about gouache, and let me see, let me put a little piece of, get a little gouache here. I'm gonna put a little gouache here and just see. It's very, like I said, it's really close to, I'll do that later, but first let's do this. I was gonna say that you can, how dark this watercolor is really. So now I have to be a little bit more careful when I use the tip of my brush with this. And like I told you earlier, this is a more of a synthetic brush for acrylic, but I buy them at Michael's and I feel they feel good to me. So this is going into the yellow, which is still wet, and it's, you know, it'll bleed at the edges. It'll be kind of a soft. I think if you want it to be crisper, you could do it when it's dry, or you can just, this is actually not too bad. It's not bleeding much. You can go back into it later if you want more of an edge. But there's one little playing there. So everybody can just try different, let's see. So I could use red here and then get orange. So you do that. So does anybody have questions about this?
I think they're all working hard.
All right, that's what we're here for, really, is to try to work on this, see what happens. This is more of an orange, although it's supposed to be red. I forget what the name of it is. It's already orange. I'll use a little bit of this red. Oh, I just used gouache. Let's see, let's use the gouache. So really the gouache does behave a lot like watercolor, but you know, why not use watercolor then? So gouache is more for, I think, if you want to stay more opaque, but again, like I said, I like to mix them. If I added more, yeah.
Someone commented in chat that she's always been intimidated with watercolor versus oils. And she said watercolor seems to require that you let go of controlling the outcome, that you have a little more flexibility in what your final image looks like. But that can also be kind of freeing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, that's why, again, playing around like we're doing today is, you know, good, because you don't have, hopefully, you know, what is, I don't know what the expectation is. And I think, like I've always found, like with ink, I'm sorry, with oil, you can, you know, you can go over things. With watercolor, you can go over things, but you can also very quickly deaden, or they say, like, you know, sort of overwork it. It's sort of easy to overwork watercolor if you keep correcting your things that you think are off or a mistake or whatever. You know, if you just keep going over it, then yes, so that way it could be, if you're aiming for something you can't achieve and you keep going over it. So you do have to let it kind of either, you know, like you said, the person said. All right, so there's like another sort of, and it has kind of spread into the other, to the yellow, which is fine, but if I don't like that, I can let it dry a little bit and then go back into it. And time is that now? So we just have a couple minutes. So this is something, if you wanted to finish up on your own, you know, you could do that. Oh, this is my favorite color to use. I love this color, this turquoise.
That is a beautiful color.
Yeah. I want to mix it into this green here, into this yellow. I love this. This is gonna get a lime green. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to do the sphere. Oh my goodness, I just remembered. I'm like, oh, isn't there something else? And this reminded me of, oh dear, I was going to do the sphere too. Oh well. You know, I knew I had a little bit too much going on there, but, and you know, maybe I didn't have to show some of the slides, who knows? But yeah, that's what I forgot. Sorry about that, everybody.
Well, hopefully this still gave people a good opportunity to kind of experiment with watercolors. It sounds like some people have worked in other mediums and maybe, you know, hadn't done this before or were a little hesitant. And so hopefully this gave you a little practice with the tools and the sort of texture and process of watercolor. I am going to stop the recording at this point, and if people have something that they want to share, maybe we can do a reveal with removing the plastic wrap and the salt, and we can see what the results came out like.
Yeah.
But I'll stop the video in case that makes people feel a little more comfortable sharing.